Every great empire starts with a question no one else is asking. In the early 1960s, running was not considered a serious sport. It had no stadiums full of fans, no sponsorships, no spotlight. It was something you did alone. In the early morning, before the rest of the world had even woken up. But one young runner believed something the rest of the industry refused to consider. He believed the shoes themselves were holding athletes back, and he was determined to prove it. His name was Phil Knight, a middle-distance runner at the University of Oregon. Not the fastest man on his team, but perhaps the most curious. While his teammates focused on training harder, Knight kept noticing something else entirely. The equipment was outdated, heavy, rigid, built for durability, not performance. No one else seemed to question it. It was simply accepted, the way things had always been done. But Knight couldn't let it go. He began to wonder what would happen if someone approached the problem differently, not as an athlete looking for shortcuts, but as a businessman looking for an opportunity hiding in plain sight. That single question would eventually reshape an entire industry. That question followed him into graduate school, where it became the subject of a business paper, one that barely stood out among his classmates' work at the time. But Knight couldn't leave the idea in a classroom. He reached out to his former college coach, a man who had spent years quietly experimenting with shoe design of his own. Together, they made a decision that most people would have called reckless. They began importing running shoes from overseas and selling them directly out of the trunk of a car. No storefront, no employees, no safety net. Just two men, a folding table, a stack of shoe boxes, and a shared belief that runners deserved something better than what the market was offering them. Years later, that same coach stood in his kitchen early one morning, staring at an ordinary waffle iron. An idea struck him. He poured liquid rubber into the mold and waited. What came out of that kitchen experiment was unlike anything on the market. A sole with a grip pattern no factory had ever produced. Lightweight, durable, radically different. It wasn't designed in a corporate lab with engineers and budgets and approval committees. It was built in a garage by two men who refused to accept the limitations their industry had quietly agreed to live with. Sometimes, the biggest breakthroughs don't come from expertise. They come from obsession. But belief alone doesn't pay the bills. By the mid-1970s, the company was expanding faster than its finances could support. Orders were pouring in from across the country, but the cash to fulfill them simply wasn't there. Knight found himself sitting across from bankers again and again, each meeting more tense than the last. They saw a warehouse running dangerously low on inventory. They saw razor-thin margins. They saw a business one bad quarter away from collapse. One wrong decision here, and the entire company disappears from history, remembered only as a promising idea that ran out of time. Knight signed the loan anyway, not because the risk had disappeared, but because walking away was never really an option for him. What ultimately kept the company alive wasn't just persistence, it was design. A bold new silhouette, bright, unconventional colors, a shape unlike anything else being sold on store shelves at the time. Competitors dismissed it as unnecessary, a flashy distraction from what actually mattered in a shoe. But athletes noticed immediately. The fit was different. The performance was different. Then, something happened that no one had fully anticipated. People who had never run a competitive race in their life started asking where they could buy a pair for themselves. The product had quietly become something bigger than its original purpose. The company stopped selling exclusively to runners. It started selling a feeling instead. The feeling of pushing past your own limits, whatever they happen to be. One television commercial, One unforgettable image of an athlete crossing a finish line against impossible odds. That was enough to shift public perception entirely. What had started as a niche shoe company for serious athletes was rapidly becoming a name recognized far beyond any track or stadium. Retailers wanted it on their shelves. Celebrities wanted to be seen wearing it. An entire generation began to associate the brand with ambition itself. Factories multiplied across continents. New stores opened in cities that had never carried the brand before. The company's global footprint expanded year after year at a pace few in the industry had predicted or believed was even possible. What had begun with two men, a waffle iron, and a car trunk full of shoeboxes had transformed into one of the most valuable and recognizable brands on the entire planet. Not because the product was flawless from the start, but because the people behind it refused to stop improving it. Today, Phil Knight rarely speaks in public. He doesn't need to. His decision still echoes through every stadium, every sneaker store, every young runner lacing up for the very first time, often without knowing the story behind the brand on their feet. Because the real story was never really about shoes. It was about a man who looked at an entire industry and refused to accept its limitations as permanent. He believed the impossible was simply something no one had tried hard enough to solve yet. And somewhere, right now, another runner is lacing up, carrying that same belief forward without even realizing it.